Hi, and welcome back to ConTinual. Tonight in the panel room, we're going to be talking about one of the most fun topics you can possibly dive into in the writing world. We're going to be talking about intellectual property. So everybody get your coffee because you might need a little bit of the caffeine as this gets heated tonight. But before we dive in and get started, I am your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we have with us a couple of regular faces here that know a lot about this side of the business. So Stuart, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Jaffe. I'm best known for the Max Porter Paranormal Mysteries, but I write a ton of different series, including the Midnight Mysteries from Falstaff Books, Nathan K. action thriller fantasy series, and Parallel Society, and tons more.
Jenny.
Hi, I'm Ginny Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Dog Books, but I also write under a variety of other pen names and in every genre and in every length. And I really have a lot of thoughts about protecting my intellectual property.
And Lola.
My name is Lola Laracy. I write a lot of short stories, and my debut novel was Trudy Lim's Spaceship Captain Earth Detective. And one day I'll have my second novel finished, except for every time I go back to it, I see something I messed up or I forgot to write something. And so it's just like turned into a ball of ooze. Anyways, but I've also been podcasting since like 2008. I kind of stopped recently because a lot of stuff, but I've been podcasting a lot. And my music podcast, there's something that happened regarding intellectual property that still, it's been 12 years and I'm still like, so yeah, I got a lot to say.
So just to kind of set the baseline for everybody coming in, intellectual property, IP, whatever we want to call it, is really all about that product of the mind. And when we talk about the product of the mind, we can't really protect ideas. What we protect is how we execute on those ideas. If we were all protecting our ideas, then as writers, none of us would get anything done because we'd be stepping on somebody else's idea that's the exact same thing, but we wouldn't do it the same way. And tonight, probably the main things we'll be talking about are going to be those things that are protected under copyright, those things that are protected under trademark, and we'll probably get a little bit maybe even into design. So before we go in too deep, let's sort of go around and talk a little bit about how you approach IP, what your ideas and general thoughts are, what level of experience you have with it. As creators, this is one of those things that everybody really doesn't necessarily like to have fun with, but it's a necessary evil to the business. So how about you, Stuart?
Well, beyond it being a necessary evil, I think it is by far the most important thing as a writer you need to understand, because it is how you make money is off that copyright and all the things it can be. So that's number one. I'd also say that I think Dean Wesley Smith talks about this a lot. He calls it the magic bakery theory. And so I'm going to paraphrase that because I think it's a really good way to try and understand what you have when you create a book or a story or whatever. And that is that if you imagine a bakery where you're the baker and you create pies, and you can take a slice of that pie and you put it on a magic shelf, and each slice of that is a slice, that pie is your IP, and each slice is a way that you are selling it. But the neat thing, the big deal about copyright is that if somebody comes in and buys that slice, you still own the pie. And tomorrow you can create a whole new slice to go in that exact same space and be that exact same thing again for somebody else to buy it. It never goes away. And so you can sell the same rights over and over and over. And one of the big ways that ends up, you can make money off of that, and we'll get into this, but is through, for example, if you're fortunate enough to get anything through Hollywood, whether it actually gets made or not. And I've done that, and we'll talk about it. And as you all know right this second, nothing with my name was ever made, but I made money off of those slices. So we'll talk, I mean, we'll get into all that, but I think those are two of the key things. Just understand the concept that IP is, if you handle your rights correctly, is eternally renewable.
Mhm.
way of selling something. And B, it is the most important thing you need to learn from the business side of writing. If otherwise you can get fleeced.
very quickly.
And repeatedly.
So how about you, Jenny?
I have a lot of thoughts about IP and they go into a variety of areas, but I'm with Stuart. It's the most important part. And knowing the right way to protect yourself is very important. The poor man's copyright is not the right way to do it. And I really just want to throw that out there right away. Please stop sending manuscripts to yourself via the mail. It does nothing. It's a waste of time, paper, ink, and stamps. There are a variety of other ways to prove that you are the intellectual property owner, that you are the creator. That way has no bearing on anything. And I like to bring that up because I've been in a lot of IP discussions even before I was a published author, and the number of people that will argue that that is the way, and that's the right way to do it, is astonishing to me. The other thing, though, is that if you're going with a traditional publisher, in most cases, not all, but most, they are already handling your copyright. It's something they do as is part of the process of publishing, which is wonderful. But for those who are self-published only or who are hybrid authors like myself, you forget that, oh, I self-published this, my publisher didn't do this. I bet I don't have the same protections on, and it is work to do it, but it is something that you want to make sure you are doing. So that's kind of my thoughts. I don't have no idea if I actually answered the question right, but there we go.
We're just getting started. Just
Somebody's dog does not agree with my thoughts.
Sorry, I didn't realize I still had my sound.
Or he's like, wait, you forgot the most important thing.
I was going to say that sounds distinctly like most of the conversations I get into around intellectual property.
You're very opinionated.
Yes.
How about you, Lola?
I still be quiet.
Don't worry, mine will start soon.
Okay. I gave them these big smartphones. So I'm self-published. So I'm kind of like a hybrid. I like my short stories, but when I would send them in, they would never be accepted. So I started publishing them under Creative Commons on my own website. I figured it's like a lost leader. I don't know, that's a Walmart term from my heady days at Walmart. So I figure, it's something for me to say, oh, hey, read this. If you like it, I have a book. So I figured it was just a good thing to introduce myself to people. But when it came to my novel that I spent years working on, and I learned how to format myself and I self-published myself, I'm like, okay, no. So that says all rights reserved in it. Now, am I going to beat someone over with a bat if they give a copy to their friend? Probably not. My concern has always been, I don't want someone putting their name on my book and saying it's there, or, going to a con with a stack of 100 and selling them, no. I don't want anyone monetizing it. If you give a copy to your friend, I'll be like, that's not really cool, but I'm not going to call the cops. I'm not a narc. But yeah, I take that a little more to heart with my book. But I do like the idea of Creative Commons because some people made it work. There are people who make a decent living. I remember when Jonathan Colson came out, like in the 2000s, I read an article once where he said how much he made. Now this was 18 years ago. He made $500,000 in a year from people giving him stuff because everything he did was Creative Commons. It was all, pay as you go, pay as you want. And people loved him, so they did it. And I'm like, how do I get that? It never happened.
Well, and it's probably worth it to kind of set the stage. So copyrights protect written word, images, representations, things like this. So, you're going to see copyrights protect, books, music, artwork, all those sorts of things. Trademarks are a bit different because trademarks are really about how you brand yourself. And I get into a lot of conversations about the difference between, well, is this a copyright or a trademark? And when you look, it's pretty straightforward and all about the use. Creative Commons is a really fascinating project. So when you look at Creative Commons, it is a way of creating a copyright that allows people to use your material without having to come and license it, get permissions, but you can definitively set up, in essence, how people can use it. And coming from the technology world and software side of the things, I deal with this a lot in terms of both copyright and patents. But you find a lot of people in the open source community that will create the idea of, well, here's my design. If this is for personal use, cool, knock yourself out, go play with it. If it is for, I'm testing it out, knock yourself out, go play with it. If it is, I'm going to go make money from it, then you'd best be licensing it. For writers, Creative Commons creates a really fascinating possibility of creating tools, formats, different things that, again, you can go out there and say, take an idea, play with it, but definitely have real legal protections with something, but also not have to deal with as many of the headaches, depending on how you want to deal with the money. And the cases with Creative Commons, and especially with indie publishing industries, has changed a lot over the last number of years because Creative Commons has become a lot more popular. And one of the most famous quotes, oh, you got something, Stuart?
Well, go on. Just finish your thought there.
One of the things that really came out, and we can sort of attribute some of the idea of Creative Commons, and I'm going to actually break down and read a quote because if I don't, I always screw it up. We all hear there's a famous old quote that goes and says, information wants to be free. And that's only part of the story. When I teach intellectual property classes, this is one of the first things I pull up and talk about. I've written a lot of things about this. But the actual original quote goes back to a conversation between Stuart Brand and Steve Wozniak, names you might have heard of. And they were hanging out at a hackers conference in the early 80s. And it was recorded as being said, on one hand, information wants to be expensive because it's so valuable. The right information in the right place just changes your life. On the other hand, information wants to be free because the cost of getting it out is getting lower and lower all the time. So you always have these two fighting against each other. And that really sums up a lot of intellectual property. And when we look at it, I think this is really going to be the debate tonight, is as we go through and we face the idea that technology is making it easier and easier to create information, create things, disseminate them, pirate them, all these sorts of different things that we see and deal with. We're also going to talk a little bit probably about how law is not necessarily caught up with copyright and some of these sorts of ideas. But
Pirates should burn.
I think what I was going to say, and I'll let you finish that, was simply so we're all to get some like copyright 101 stuff out of the way. It's important for everybody to understand that now, but I forget what year the law changed, but basically the law is that basically anything you write, the second you write it, it's already under copyright in your name. That's so if the reason you register a book with the government is because if somebody takes my book, puts their name on it and starts selling it, if I don't have it registered, I can sue them and get them to stop. And if I prove that I've written it before them, it would get them to stop. But I won't be able to get any monetary, I won't be able to get any losses. Or it'll be much, much more difficult. If I'm registered, if I actually have proof, that the copyright through the government, then I have a legal standing that gives me more options and more chances of making a monetary success out of it.
Well, and actually, if you don't have the registered copyright now, you pretty much, you even have a problem getting a cease and desist because it's a he said, she said scenario.
Right. You'd still have to have some kind of proof that you can't just say I wrote it, but right. Assuming you have some kind of.
Right. And the poor man's copyright does not stand up in court.
No.
And it never has, and it's never
The,
gonna.
the other thing I think that's really important to understand is it is easy for books, for a book that you wrote yourself, not with somebody else, there's nobody else involved. It's extremely easy to get copyright. You can do it from your home. You go online to the copyright website, and the website's a bit clunky because it's designed to run on just about any computer, no matter how old. As of last, I think it's cost $45. It used to be 35. I think they moved it up.
No, I think it's up to 60 now.
No, so here's something. So don't click on just
Yeah, I
get a
know.
copyright. If you go in through their menus a bit, you'll find you can copyright just a single work, and that's cheaper. It's the same copyright. It's same protection. It's just you're copywriting just one book at a time, and it costs you only $45.
I was thinking as of January 1, it went up again, but I could be wrong.
No, it's 45 because I just recently did it. But anyway, whatever it is, it's relative to the expense you'll have getting a book in shape to go online. It's the one of the most minor things. It takes a few minutes, you upload it, and then you wait, and depending on the time of year and how busy they are, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 3 months, but eventually you get a little thing in the mail, little letter, and it's your certificate, and you're set, and that's it.
Mhm.
So do it. That costs, I mean, next to nothing, and there's just no reason not to do it.
And there's a lot of reasons to do it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's pretend that I didn't know you did that officially through the government. I mean, of course I knew because like I know everything, but let's pretend I didn't know. If I wrote my book and self-published it and everything in 2013, can I go on there now?
Absolutely.
Okay,
You
good.
can go on and backdate. They'll say what, when was it actually created and all that. And as long as nobody's already, gotten it under your name.
I Google it all the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, don't just me. Okay.
No, I mean, chances are it's not the people who have to worry about that are much more prolific and wealthy than anybody that I know.
Nobody's looking for my book. Let's steal hers.
So, or mine, or I mean, it's just,
no, don't say that. Earlier on, no, I had somebody, I was at San Diego Comic-Con when I got the news that someone was selling my book as their own, the third book in my Alien series. And fortunately, the fan friend who let me know knew what to do. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of Comic-Con. I can't do anything, right? I barely have phone reception. And she handled it and Amazon got it down and everything else. But this is like my third book in the Alien series. And I mean, I had a worldwide fan base, but it wasn't like everyone knows my name. They don't know, everyone doesn't know my name now, let alone in, 2011.
Mhm.
So it can happen to anyone. It just, if some scum decides that, and they are scum, okay?
Mhm.
I don't want anybody out there who thinks that I think you stealing any of our work is okay. I think you're all scum and should burn. Have a nice day.
Well, I'll give an example of that. So a friend of mine, and this was nonfiction, but we found a guy who was taking the work of people giving presentations and basically doing a little formatting and slapping his name on it. But what he was doing was crediting both himself and the actual author and creator and taking it to print with Amazon. And it was a lot of works that he had done this with. And it was rather much of a mess to untangle.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the downsides of having an open marketplace and making it so easy, is it can be work to keep up with and making sure you're working and protecting your stuff.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite stories is back in the nice peer-to-peer days when you could still intercept the original files and some of that sort of stuff, and you find viruses and malware and all that kind of fun stuff floating through. I had a work that was floating around that we intercepted, and it was like, okay, great. We took the file, stripped out the last third of the book, put in a link, and replaced the file. Doesn't work like that anymore, but this is the, the good old early days of peer-to-peer. And when you do things like that, you can find interesting things. So if you guys, how much of you guys run into piracy?
God, I have somebody whose entire job it is to send takedown notices. So constantly. And it doesn't, the biggest problem with piracy is that it's a twofold thing. One, the pirates, for the most part, are just going and pulling your stuff and tossing it up there because they make money. Some of them, yes, they're doing it to spread malware and, whatever. If you were trying to steal my book, you deserve what happens to you. The ones I really, really am bitter about are the people who claim to love your work, go and steal it and then put it up so everybody can steal it because, oh, this is a great book. I saved, my brain practically exploded. This chick gave me a 5-star review on Amazon. And then I went to the other place she reviewed it because she was smart enough not to say on Amazon she was stealing it, right? And then another place, she's like, and I've studied, it's up here and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I want to find you and I want to club you to death like a baby seal. It's like, wow, you love my work, so you want to steal from me so I can't pay my rent. Thanks, you suck. I've been dealing with it since my first book came out. It never stops. It goes in cycles, but it never stops. And one cycle will be, book 6 for whatever reason. Something will be, hey, look over there, but it never ends. And I hate all of these people. I'm not joking. I really, really hate them. They create stress. They create it's a waste of work thing. We have to get it. We send it to Penguin and Penguin tries to take it down. And, the comforting thing is, most of those, keep in mind the word is most of those were just malware sites. Great. What about the ones that weren't? It's insidious and it's constant, and China is not a help with this because they don't care, as the government doesn't care. So you probably have a better shot with the actual, the Chinese public as opposed to the Chinese government. But as soon as you've got major countries who are like, yeah, whatever, it makes it that much harder. And they take the sites down and put them back up.
It's a problem of whack-a-mole. And
yes.
And for like for me, I can't hire somebody to do this for me, so I pretty much just have to ignore it. And if my fans ever brought to my attention somebody actually like on Amazon stealing, then I would act. But all the pirate sites, I used to have alerts to tell me where they are and try and do stuff, and I'm better off just writing another book and doing my best to get legitimate fans to actually pay me so I can keep writing, and thankfully they do. But
what I resent with piracy now, back in the days of Napster, I used to do it, but I would do it with stuff that you couldn't find, like, oh, there's somebody in a coffee shop who made a version of Heat of the Moment, true story, and I'm like, oh, and now it's on a hard drive somewhere and I don't know where, and I'll never hear it again, and that makes me sad. So I would do stuff with stuff I couldn't get. Now I know people, and this makes me so mad. They say, oh, I'll never pay for media. I'll never pay anything. Why should I get it free? And I tell them, how are those people going to be able to make media if they can make money? I mean, if they can't, they need a job. They need to feed their children. They need the children to go to school. They need a place to live. Not to mention some of them want profit, but even just the basics, they need a job. And the commercials, if we're at TV, this comes up with TV and movies a lot, they need you to watch the commercials. I'll sit there and I'll watch the freaking commercials. I'm not going to buy the stuff, but I'll watch it. They need you to watch the commercials because that's how they get their money. And that makes me so mad. And I actually had a friend send me a file of free stuff. And I'm like, don't do that. It's not right for the people. I'm not well off or anything, but I can afford a book here and there. So if I really want something, I'll buy it. Don't just freeload everything off, because that's disrespectful to the people who spend a lot of time.
Also, there are these things called libraries.
Yeah,
and they are where you borrow a book and then you return it and you get to read it, and they're all free. So everyone, well, it's expensive. No, no, your library is free. Your library
Right.
is completely
And
and utterly free.
the key thing there that the
Mhm.
public doesn't seem to know is that we get paid for those books.
Yes, yes, please, please
So
go to
it's
your
free to
library.
you, but I'm not being stolen from. I'm getting
Yes,
paid.
exactly. Libraries raw, everything else boo.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, and the whole I really, every time someone says it to me, I just really want to go, okay, where do you work? Great, what do you do? Great, I'm just going to come in and just take something from you because it doesn't matter, right? Oh, well, oh, so you're
Mhm.
just a thief. Okay,
And I
gotcha. You're a thief.
But
And I
everything
think
should
this,
be free.
well, and I think
Mm.
this is really kind of highlighting how we perceive, because, and I think that ebooks have really, and digital media has contributed a lot to this, because
Mhm,
you only
it's easy.
you see it as the bits and bytes. You don't see the physical product in hand. You don't
Mhm.
consider and think about things that come in a digital media the same way you would if I pick up and hold that physical book in my hand. You know, where
Mhm.
you can go and say, well, it costs paper and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that there aren't still people out there stealing that too. But a lot of the time there's the perception of, well, it's bits and bytes. And much like frequently in dealing with clients and things like that are like, well, I just want to do an ebook. Great. The material difference in the work that it takes to prepare and do an ebook and an ebook and a written book.
It's the
Still have to
difference is
write the thing.
paper.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
the
And
difference is
someone else usually
paper.
does that.
I had this discussion with my publisher because, you know, in the early days, we were like, why aren't ebooks so much cheaper, right? And she's like, all the costs for the book have nothing to do with the paper.
Mhm.
The paper is the cheapest part of the whole process. The paper and the printing, that's the small pie. All the rest, the author, the editing, the copy editing, promotion, all these other things, all of that goes into the cost. The paper is, the physical paper and printing is one of the smaller slices of that pie. So yeah, everyone wants to pretend because it's digital, it didn't take any work and it's just ether, but that's not reality. It's just a convenient reality for people who want to steal.
And if they want a good book, then they'll learn that. Now, if they want a crappy book that looks like it was put together in an afternoon, sure, there are plenty of those. Go have it.
But you know what? They shouldn't be stealing. You know
Yeah, they
what?
shouldn't be stealing that either.
They shouldn't be stealing those people's books either. True, there are lots of people out there who typed the end, tossed something, piece of garbage up, and are shocked. You can be shocked that they don't have a ton of fans. But even those people should not be stolen from. Okay, it's just because, you know, you and I don't think it's a good book doesn't mean it gives anybody the right to steal it.
So I think we've pretty much made it established that we don't like our IP being stolen.
At all.
But
at all.
Jenny, I'm
I
going to
don't
have to
know if
put a little
we're-
pirate flag in the corner for you.
Yeah.
To kind of shift gears a bit, I wanted to bring this up before I forgot, which is this, the
Mhm.
copyright
Oh.
handbook. If you've not,
Mhm.
this is like reading a textbook. It's dry, it's boring, it's also essential. It makes it very clear everything you need to know. It's written by lawyers and they update it all the time, but they explain all the basics. They explain all kinds of copyright stuff that you don't even need to know because you probably are not dealing with those issues. But if you ever are, if you have this reference, you know, and it gives you links to forms and things that you would need to fill out. So I just recommend that.
It's over on my shelf here as well.
Again, it's the most important thing you need to know as a writer. So here, that is literally the handbook on how to do it.
Well, and maybe, oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Well, I was going to say one of the things that I want to in light of Stuart say before I forget, you need to read your contracts when you have them, because too many people allow their intellectual property to be stolen legally by their publishers. So among the many things you need to do, one of the reasons you want to have a good agent if you're going traditional is that the agent's job is to be able to identify what is harmful and predatory in the contract and get that changed, and or tell you, I don't care what they're offering, this is, you should not be going here. If you're not careful, things like licensing rights, movie rights, TV, all of these other things are going to be grabbed by the publisher. And if you don't know to say, no, 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 not that. And in some cases, especially when you're a first-time author, they will not give you audio rights. It took years of fighting for me to get the audio rights back to the Alien series. And you know, people ask, well, why don't you have it out in audio? It's like, because that fight was exhausting, and now we have to gird our loins for going forth to see if there's anything, if we're going to do it ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. So but that was a trade-off I had to make in order to get bought, but I kept all the other rights, all visual, gaming, everything else. And if you don't do that, what happens when Hollywood comes calling is you don't have anything. I can't remember, I think it's the Vampire Diaries author isn't even allowed to write her own books anymore because the contract she signed was so predatory that the publisher owns everything about it. She owns nothing.
Right.
So if you're
Well,
not careful going in, you lose all the rights because you signed them away in the excitement of, look, somebody wants to publish this. So
you've
read
touched
your
on
contracts.
you've just touched on a massive number of different
Yeah.
things, and there's some really important ones I don't want to get lost. One is that in a good contract, in a non-predatory contract, we say you sold the rights, but you're not selling the rights.
Licensing.
You're licensing the rights. Okay.
Yes.
You still, if you, as long as you don't, again, in a morally upstanding contract, a normal contract, you are just giving them the right to use your right for whatever the terms of the contract are. And that's it. That's why it's the magic bakery. You still own the pie. You're just letting them eat this slice that will magically come back. If you're in a predatory contract, they're buying the pie and taking it from you. And so that's one thing you definitely want to understand the difference, because is shorthand, people think, oh, I sold the rights to this or that, but they didn't. They sold the license.
Right. Yeah. And
Well,
you can sell that license over and over again. Yes, depending on terms. Yeah.
And there's one thing I want to slip in here first, which is, remember, there are varying degrees of predatory. But you know, when you're looking at it, remember, if someone says, hi, write me a check, I'm your publisher, the answer is run. They're not a publisher.
Right.
If somebody is saying, write me a check, and I cannot tell you how frequently I've had people come to me, not an attorney, however, occasionally I've had to play one on TV, where somebody goes, and I had it happen again a couple of weeks ago, where somebody comes and says, yeah, my publisher says I'm out of hours or something along those lines. You take a look. I actually had somebody again, took a look at the contract. I'm like, yeah, walk away. Well, what do you mean walk away? I'm like, you don't own the book anymore. You have paid for the privilege of giving them ownership of your book. They didn't license it. They own it. You don't own it. What do you mean? I'm going to sue. Good luck. You signed the contract. You signed a bad contract, and go write the next book.
Right. And so, Jenny mentioned having an agent, and a good agent can do that. Something I will add to that is that the preface, the key word in what I just said was good, a good agent. Yes. Okay. There is no licensing to become an agent that anybody we're all agents now. So while it's good to have an agent to look over those things, even with a good agent, if you're looking at any kind of deal, it's worth spending the money for an IP lawyer who's an actual lawyer, because an agent is not a lawyer. Some agents are lawyers, but most agents are not. Right. They're familiar with book contracts, but that doesn't mean they legally know what will hold up in court. And so even if you are with, the top agent, whoever that happens to be in a given year, I would still pay the money for an IP lawyer. And if you have no agent, definitely get an IP lawyer.
Absolutely.
And read the damn contract. I don't
Yes.
care if your agent has looked at it. I don't care if an IP attorney has also looked at it. If you don't look at it and read every frickin' word, as boring and as comma filled as those will be, and as a million and one clauses, but if you don't do that, then what you are doing is saying you're going to give the ownership and the rights to whoever just handled it right. You need to have read it so you are aware of what it is you're agreeing to, because once you sign it, now you're stuck. Period.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Nobody expects you to understand what you're reading. In fact, if you're dealing with a predatory situation, they're hoping you don't understand it and you'll sign it anyway. So look into it, read it. And the other thing is, no contract, no matter what the publisher says, no contract is written in stone until you sign it. You can change anything, and you can make it say anything. If it's going to hold up in court, it has to say something legal. It can't say something illegal. But other than that, you can do anything. So, and that brings back to one of the other points I wanted to bring up, which is we throw out a lot of terms: audiobook rights, movie rights, this right, that right. Something that's clear to know is that the rights, there are no official terms for rights. There are ones that we all agree on. So we understand audiobook rights, but you can cut that pie up any way you want. So for example, I can sell the ebook rights, the paperback rights, the hardcover rights, the book club hardcover rights, these special edition gold leaf hardcover. I can make up any time, if there's somebody willing to pay for it and I want to split it up, I can do that. So I could sit there, but obviously the more I try to hold to myself, the more I'm going to have to negotiate with whoever I'm working with. An example is, and you can do all kinds of things with them, including time limits. So this is what I did with Falstaff. Falstaff is a very easy publisher to work with because it's begun by writers, so they know what they have sympathy for your side of it. And they wanted the print rights, all print rights and the ebook rights. And I said, you don't want the audiobook rights? And he looked at me, and the publisher knows I do a lot of my own audiobooks. He said, I assume you wanted them yourself. And I said, well, I do. I said, but I'm happy to let you have them for a set period of time to see if you can do anything with them. Because if I can get somebody else to do, that's less work for me. And if not, then the rights automatically revert to me. So we agreed on a time period, and that got signed in. And he was able to sell them. So we made a bunch of money before the book ever came out, and that worked out great. But had it not sold, I'd have the rights back. I wouldn't have had to fight for them. You can do whatever your imagination comes up with in terms of the type of right you want to sell to a publisher, and know that, you just have to decide where you draw the line in the sand. Because obviously, especially a major publisher, they want everything, and they're not gonna, they don't see a reason to bend at all because they don't care.
Well,
especially the newer the author, the less they're going to bend for you. I mean, there was no way I could get fancy with the Alien series with anything that related to the book, right? So all the print, physical and they licensed the rights to that, and audiobooks, but I got to keep everything else, which was, I felt, especially for the first book, that was big. Okay, there was no real pushback on that,
especially because now it's very common to see in traditional, in any contracts, a lot of times a rights grab where they basically just take they want the license to everything.
Oh, it was in the boilerplate. My agent and I were just like, nope.
And they've started there. They started because they got burned when the ebooks came out. They've now started putting in these clauses that say, all rights, including formats that don't exist yet. And I wouldn't, I would not sign that. I would say no. For me, I'm like, and I'm even if I had a major publisher say we want the audiobooks, I would say the same thing. That's great, you can have them, but there's a set date where if you haven't done anything, they come back to me. I'm happy. I want the publisher to exploit everything. Take it all and exploit it and make us lots of money, but they're not going to do that. They want, so you need to, I think another thing public and actually a lot of writers don't know or understand is that the reason publishers take all these rights and then are so loath to give them back, even if the book is essentially out of print, is because it counts as an asset to the value of the company, even if they're never going to use it.
Mhm.
That's why they hold on to it even when they know there's no chance in hell they're ever going to use it. They don't want to give up that asset, and that's something. And so that
Yeah,
means
and related,
that's what gives you a little leverage with it. That's what's valuable
yeah,
to you, to them.
and related to that, even if you have after X amount of time it reverts, they're still going to fight it. That's why it was we had a set number of after X number of years audiobooks revert. Oh, but since the books were coming out one after each other, they're like, oh, but oh, it was a nightmare. So even with a legitimate contract with a legitimate company, it can be quite a fight.
Right. And so one of the ways around that, not guaranteed, but is to put a hard date on something. So it's not just 3 years after an event, it's on June 23rd of 2027. And then you send them a letter 30 days beforehand reminding them that this is going to happen. You do and then if they want to fight it, you have every legal standing, and it won't go more than a day in court. They'll appeal it and all this, but you've won before it's even gone out the gate.
Well, and I think it's important to actually talk about how important the clauses around the reversions of rights are and what that really means. And so when you talk about rights revert to you under specific conditions, whether that's a date, whether that is, it's not, the audiobook rights revert to me after 12 months after the initial publication of the book, if it's not in an audiobook form. The idea of reversion of rights is really critical, and they're going to differ a lot depending on the medium. If you're talking short stories, a lot of the time that's going to be I'm going to give you rights for 12 months, exclusive rights for a period.
Right.
Other things like it's a novel, the old language used to be as long as it's in print. Well, when ebooks came out, nothing ever has to go out of print. So how do you define what is or is not in print? I think that's
actually in the old day before ebooks, it wasn't just that it's in print. I mean, if you signed that, you were insane. It was a certain threshold of books sold. And so when they wanted to keep the rights, even though they would literally send people out to just buy the books in the last quarter, just to
they're still doing that.
Still do it.
I can say for certain with one of my books, not Penguin Random House, but another publisher who shall remain nameless is doing that. As soon as it looks like they're not going to hit that threshold, suddenly we just make it over, and they still own the rights. So
which again just should prove to anybody listening to this the value of that right, because this is one of those things. New writers, especially if they get lucky enough, get their chance at a publishing deal, and they assume they have no leverage, and they assume they can't get anything. And it's true that their leverage is lower especially because their desire is really high to get that deal. But the fact is that they wouldn't be talking to you if they didn't see value in that they think they can make a buck off you. And all those little rights are of value. And if they want to fight for them, be my guest, but you're not going to get them for nothing. And if their attitude is, well, then walk away, then maybe that probably wasn't the publisher for you, because they really weren't that behind your work.
And one of the other things I think we're seeing a lot more of as we have an expansion in streaming services and other things like this is publishers that may not work in those mediums are a lot happier these days to try to secure those rights and sub them out. And you've got to make a determination. If you've gotten that publishing deal, does it make sense to work with that publisher to see if they've got an inroads to manage those publication rights? Or if you want to make sure that you're the one that's holding on to those rights to try to get, whether it's a streaming deal done, a movie deal done, something along those lines.
And we went silent. Wow.
Silence. Wow.
Just to ponder Jim's brilliant words.
Well,
I know, we're just all pondering. I want to mention one thing that kind of goes in the way of IP, and it's fan fiction. Some people are a-okay with fan fiction, and that's great. And some people are not okay with fan fiction. And it is definitely stealing an IP. It's stealing somebody else's stuff and doing with it as you will. And some people are cool with it, and some people are not. My only recommendation is if you know an author really doesn't like you doing fan fiction of their work, do fan fiction of the works where the authors are happy that you're doing it.
Yeah.
I personally am not happy with people doing fan fiction. Please don't. But there are plenty of people who are really supportive of it and great, do that fan fiction in their world. I don't, it's mine and not yours is my viewpoint on it. And I'm not really pro at all fan fiction. And like I said, I know there are authors out there who got their start because of it and who love that people do it. And that's an individual thing. But there's also a point where if you're not careful, certain institutions will sue if you have trod too far over the line. And I know Viacom is the really easy example with Star Trek. And in that sense, they're not wrong. They have the legal right to do that. So if you are a fan fiction author, or you want to be, or you just love the heck out of it, just try to be careful and be thoughtful and understanding that not everybody thinks it's the coolest thing in the world.
The key thing, if you're a fan fiction writer, really the easiest thing to do, you want to write your fan fiction, my stuff, go right ahead, but don't try to sell it.
Yep.
That's where you get into trouble. As long as you're just writing a story and essentially writing a story and sharing it with friends who you don't know across the internet, then that's not any different than writing a story and sharing it with your neighbor. But when you start selling it and trying to make money off the things that I created, that's where you get into issues.
Well,
and that's where Star Trek went wrong. I'm just going to interject. I actually saw the guy who did, I forgot the name of it. It was a really glossy movie that he was putting together, and he did like a short.
Right. Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah. I can't think of the
Artemis or whatever. I remember it started
starts with an A. I can't remember exactly what, but it was really good, and it had a lot of the people from Star Trek, and it was really well done, very glossy. And I liked the guy. I heard him speak and everything, but he was trying to make money. He had no rights to this whatsoever, and he was going to release this and make money. That was my understanding anyways. And I was like, just not the way you're supposed to go.
Well, there's also another really good reason why fan fiction can become a problem. And Jenny, I know we've talked about this before. It's the one that says, if I've got a series arc that I'm working on and somebody gets enough fan fiction is out there, at some point, somebody's going to hit on some storyline I'm already working on. I don't want to have to get into a legal fight because somebody posts a storyline I was working on. And yeah, if I know or don't know about the fanfic is kind of irrelevant. But if I start going down that path, those people that are heavy into fanfic may come and say, oh, well, you stole so-and-so's storyline. Yeah. No, I've had this arced out for 5 books. This is where it was naturally going.
While that will be a legal hassle, as writers, you should know you're legally don't have to worry about. You're not going to get into any trouble because, and this is something else we didn't even really talk about. Again, copyright 101. When you copyright a book, you can't copyright.
Wait. The fan fiction people can get in trouble, but not the IP owner.
Not the IP owner.
But the point is,
well,
even if you actually did read some fanfic and thought that's a good idea, I'm going to use it, that's completely legal. There's nothing illegal about an idea, okay? Any idea, because we've all written the same ideas over and over. What you're copywriting is an expression of that idea. This is why I can write a vampire story, right? Vampires, I didn't create vampires. I didn't create the rules of vampires. I can write a robot story and use Asimov's 3 laws. Everybody knows, who reads science fiction knows them, and I can do my own version of them. I can't use his exact laws. That's his expression of what he thinks robots should do. But the idea of having laws for robots is not a copyrightable. That's just an idea.
Right.
Well, and when I say it can cause trouble, absolutely. For the writer, I may then be compelled to actually pursue an action to protect my IP.
Right.
And number two, because I've seen this happen where I have no idea that somebody's writing fanfic. I go down a path that happens to stray just close enough to that somebody wrote fanfic. And the next thing is you have fans going out there and talking about how you poached on the fanfic. I've seen it happen, and it's
Yep.
Oh, there's definitely, yeah. I just meant from a copyright
from a
legal
legal
IP
standpoint, no, you're fine.
you're okay. There's all kinds of other headaches that can happen.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
I don't know. I see fanfic like in the same way I look at piracy, which is that it's whack-a-mole. I can't stop it. So I don't have the resources to stop it. You know, Paramount, who owns Star Trek, they have the resources.
Yeah, Viacom owns Paramount. The Viacom definitely, yeah.
They have the resources, but
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's just to anybody who is writing fan fiction, just don't do it for authors who are blatantly saying, I am every time it comes up, don't do it with my work. And people will argue with me. Other authors will argue with me, like, well, what is this? I'm like, I don't care. I don't care why you think it's okay. I don't think it's okay. So don't do it with mine. Yes, do it with theirs. They want it. And someone else was like, well, they'll buy more of my books. Fabulous. Because I don't want them doing fan fiction of mine.
Mhm.
There we go. It's easy. You win. Just
file the
don't.
serial numbers off and change the names to protect the guilty.
Yeah, do it.
it worked for
Yes,
E.L. James.
if you want to do it, well, no, I will be honest. I really wanted, Stephanie should have sued. But because there was very little filing. I don't know if they made a deal or she just decided, I'm going to rise above. She's a better woman than I am because I would never have risen above that. But yeah, so that's the example of made good, I guess.
Yeah, and in her case, I don't know her at all, so I can't say why she chose not to sue, but I could certainly see an argument being she'd already made millions herself. She's comfortable. Does she really want to deal with that headache? What's it going to do? It's not going to it's not going to do any good for her. So, but yeah. Anyway,
one thing I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about is because now that we as authors spend a lot of time on social media in a digital world, there's a lot of things we have to do for promotion. And Lola, I think this is going to go to kind of the podcast issue you've had. And I suspect it's related to a number of years ago. There were a lot of podcasts out there that were using popular music as intro music, as bumpers and stuff like that. And this was fairly early in the days of podcasting. I have a friend of mine who had to go strip hundreds of shows, pull them all down, strip the music to go put those back out there. We're now more aware, but I mean, again, a lot of the time we'll see memes floating around because it's got, Baby Yoda in it, or, a lot of different things like this that are copyrighted work, where we're kind of frequently getting away with using someone else's copyrighted material, but looking to see how much we get into. So Lola, do you want to kind of tell a little bit about what you ran into?
Well, I'm actually on the opposite end of the spectrum because I was a podcaster and I was using music, but I liked independent music, and they were, small outfits generally. And I was considered press. And I would get CDs in the mail. I would get MP3s. I would get all of it with the implicit, permission that I could use it. Well, there was also a gray area. So, I mean, I could never really complain because they did have absolute right, whatever. But there's also a gray area where if you see it on someone else's site, they got it as a promotion. You just put a link to it on your site and like, hey, look, here's this that I found over here, .mp3 that they got. And that was always commonly acceptable. Well, I got a cease and desist from some lawyers in freaking London. And you know what? I'm so bitter that the song, the group that did it, they actually went on to win an Oscar for best song. I won't listen to it. it's a beautiful song, I won't listen to it because I'm angry. I'm still angry. And it had nothing to do with them. They probably had no idea it happened. It was just some, and I don't even know if the lawyers in London had anything to do with them. Back then with the music stuff, people could cease and desist, and sometimes they wouldn't have any interest in the music. Just, Google blog would just take yours down. So I actually wrote to the American publicist, and he said, I'm so sorry that happened. That shouldn't happen. Of course, you could use it because it's already on. It was Minneapolis Public Radio. It's already on their site. And I wasn't like putting it on my own site. I was just linking to it saying, hey, go to NPR. They got this cool thing. And so he apologized, but the damage was done and I was pissed. So, there is, like I said, it's a gray area. There is, when you're a podcaster, it can be considered publicity, but at the same time, you don't own the rights. We all know that. So if someone kicks up a fuss, there's nothing you can do. You just go and take it down and simmer.
Well, I haven't done it in years, but for early days of podcasting, for about 6 years, my wife and I ran the Eclectic Review podcast, and we would have new music every episode. We'd have new music in the opening and closing and all the bumpers in between. But even back then, there were sites that you could go to, which were bands putting up their music for free use. They wanted you to use it. And as long as you gave them credit at the, I'd credit all the bands at the end, it was fine. And we did almost 400 episodes. So that's like 1,200 songs that we would use. And I never had a single problem, but it was all fair use or free, it was all used with the blessing of the musician.
And I started gravitating towards that more with my podcast. Now I also had a blog that went with my podcast where I would put, hey, go to NPR and look at this, listen to this. But in the actual podcast, I would use stuff that's already cleared. And there's this great guy, his name is Kevin MacLeod, MacLeod. He has thousands of songs that he does. And as long as you credit him, you can use it for free. But if you want to be nice, you can buy it and you don't have to credit him. I bought one. It was like $30, but I don't remember where I put it or what it was. So it's kind of, I know. So I tend to credit him because I would do so many of them, and I'm not rich. I'm not, so, but I was always talking him up and everything. And I mean, he seems to do really well, and it's all, all above board. He says, take it here. And I just love him to death. I mean, one day if I ever have a windfall of money, I'm just going to say, here's $1,000, dude, go be you.
Well, and I know we can keep going on this for hours because I feel sure we're going to be doing a few more rounds of this, but we've been going for a while. Is there any one last thing that you guys want to throw out there? Because I mean, I know there's
we didn't even get to the Hollywood stuff. We didn't get to there's so many, because again, there are endless ways you can cut up your IP, and we've talked a lot books, but everything everybody else has talked about, you've heard music and Hollywood and games mentioned. If anybody wants to make a song about Max Porter, or a book of a game, a Max Porter game, or a Max Porter graphic novel or movie, it's still my IP. It's still my pie that they got to come get a slice from. Mm-hmm. Every single way you could possibly imagine. In fact, Jim and I were talking years ago, and nothing ever came of it, of doing like a mystery dinner theater based on Max Porter. That would have been another IP that I would never have even thought of, but it's another slice of that pie. It can happen in any way you can think of. So again, copyright handbook, they're all in there. And if it doesn't exist in there, you can just, in the contract, spell it out in detail, whatever your creation of that piece of pie means.
I guess my takeaway or my last parting thoughts were, if it feels wrong, don't do it. Don't ever be so excited that you don't read the contract. Don't ever be so full of yourself that you think you can do whatever you want in terms of taking someone else's intellectual property. Just, listen to Jiminy Cricket and pay attention. And seriously, any contract of any kind, read it. in full, boring though it may be. But that boring is basically determining what you can or cannot keep of your own creation. So read your contracts before you sign them.
Lola?
We have to be business people. And a lot of us maybe aren't inclined to that, but you kind of have to learn if you want to do it right. Just use your critical thinking. We're writers. We have critical thinking, use it.
Well, I suspect this is just the first of many discussions around this because it is one of my favorite topics. But before we get out of here, and if remember, this is copyright 2022 for ConTinual Convention. Let everybody know, where can we find you? Social media, websites, all, where can we come get some books, all that kind of good stuff. So Stuart.
StuartJaffe.com. You can get my books everywhere: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, Kobo, all of that. I'm on Facebook more than any other. I mean, I am on Twitter and stuff, but mostly on Facebook. And I now have a Facebook group called Stuart Jaffe's Madhouse, so you can come and click to be invited into that, and we'll be happy to have you.
I haven't gotten an invitation. Jenny.
You did.
Oh, did I?
You ignored it, I think would
Probably.
be the right way of looking at that. JennyKoch.com. Like Stuart, I'm mostly on Facebook. You can find my books everywhere books are sold, including physical bookstores. Don't faint, I have books in there. But everything's available, and Amazon, of course, has everything, as does Barnes and Noble and Smashwords and blah blah blah. My newest releases are all in anthologies. I'm in Silence in the City, and Gunfight on Europa Station, and coming up, it's due to the virus troubles, supply chain has really affected things. So the Reinvented Heart should have already been out, and now I think it's coming out. It's either March or May. It's one of the M months, but that'll be coming up next. And I'm trying to think what else we were talking about, but I'm on everything. I shouldn't say everything. Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. It looks like I'm on Instagram. I'm really not. So please don't talk to me there. And for those keeping score at home, yes, Aliens Like Us is coming, just not today.
Lola?
I'm everywhere everyone mentioned. I always forget about Goodreads. I'm there too,
Oh, yeah.
but don't try to get in touch with me there because I forget about it, and I've got like 100 messages, and none of them are actually to me. They're just like notification. Like, so just don't. But I'm everywhere else, and my books are everywhere. Smashwords, all that stuff. It's only one so far, but I learned to do the paperback, the trade paperback myself, so that's there too. It's all pretty and everything. And literacy.com and archive.org, you can see my the Creative Commons books and my podcasts and stuff there, my stories. So I'm everywhere.
And I've had the pleasure of trying to herd these chickens this evening. I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamesbnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy, and I feel sure a bunch of other places I've forgotten. And of course, here at ConTinual. And we will see you guys again soon.